Hey Merfolk fans, I'm Joe. Thanks very much for joining me today. If you'd like to support my channel, please check out the link above to my Patreon page. Well, it's been a really long time since I've been able to upload anything. I've been extremely busy. Hopefully I'll come to a time soon where I'll have more time to get back to regular uploading. But for today, I just wanted to check in with you guys, show you what I've been playing with, and show you a match that I played yesterday. That was just too sensational not to share with you guys. So the list here is what I've been playing with. I've just been trying to have fun lately. I haven't really been playing competitive leagues. The metagame is kind of in a weird place with a bunch of Neoform kind of floating around. We have Modern Horizons coming out pretty soon, and that's surely going to shake things up. So I've just been kind of floating along when I have a few minutes here and there, just playing in queue matches, not really playing leagues too much. So as you can see, I've got the playset of Bends and Deprives, still working with those guys. I've been trying Reejerey in place of Master of Waves, just for fun, just to sort of see how Reejerey feels. I haven't played with him in a while. Obviously, he's got some nice synergy with Trickster, gets to tap down a lot of stuff on the opponent's side of the table. A couple Thassas. I've always loved Thassa. I think there's just insane value packed into this card. 5/5 indestructible is pretty amazing stats, and then you add the fact that you get to scry every turn, the fact that you can make creatures unblockable even without Island Walk. It's just incredibly strong, and you know, Trickster has been printed since Thassa originally came out in Theros. So Trickster is pretty neat because you can flash her in on the opponent's end step, suddenly turn Thassa into a creature, and have a sort of a surprise attack on your turn. Harbinger was actually printed after Theros, so also flash a little more expensive since you have to pay the 2 extra if you want to flash him in. Obviously, AEther Vial works really well with Thassa. You get to surprise the opponent that way with Devotion. So I don't know, Thassa's just a really fun card. I enjoy playing with her a lot. She shines in matchups that go long, like mid-range or control. She's not great against really fast aggro matchups or combo matchups. But as I've said, I'm just trying to have fun right now. Looking at the sideboard real quick, we've got 3 Ceremonious Rejections. There's plenty of Tron floating around right now, trying to run the new Karn and the Mycosynth Lattice combo. 4 Spell Pierces in the sideboard. I've always been against Spell Pierce as a main deck spell. I've tried it many times, and you know, when you get paired against humans and you draw a couple Spell Pierces, it just feels terrible. Like, Modern is a format basically built around creatures, and why would you include anything in your main deck that is totally dead against creatures? The reason we have included Spell Pierce in the main is that there are many, many strong non-creature spells in the format. So Spell Pierce has been a really, really powerful spell for me out of the sideboard in those matchups, control and combo. Any deck that's going to play removal or planeswalkers, Spell Pierce is excellent. So we've got the full playset in the sideboard, then a couple Echoing Truths, couple Dismembers, our normal well-rounded kind of interactive cards, and then a playset of Relic of Progenitus. So nothing too notable with this build. It's just, it's just mono blue Merfolk. So with that out of the way, let's have a look at this match that I was just telling you guys about. It was really exciting. Hopefully you guys enjoy the replay. Hopefully I do a good job explaining my thought process during the match. So I had lost the die roll. Opponent's going to be on the play, and I think they chose to mulligan to 6. And then I also chose to mulligan. There was just a couple Thassas. It's just not good. A single Silvergill, I couldn't even cast it since I didn't have another Merfolk to reveal, and too many lands. So here, I don't know what I'm playing against, and Silvergills should draw me into more cards. Seems like a reasonable keep to me. It's definitely not inspiring. So I kept that. The opponent mulliganed to 5. So this island is definitely going to the bottom of the library. Now, obviously, playing against an opponent on a mulligan to 5 doesn't seem like the start of particularly sensational match, but trust me, it was pretty interesting. So opponent starts with Horizon Canopy and Hardened Scales, pretty much giving away right away what we're playing against. It's Hardened Scales Affinity. This is pretty much their best opening card. Fortunately, they only have 3 spells left in hand, or I should just say 3 cards left in hand. They could be 3 lands for all we know. So I drew another island, which is obviously pretty much the worst draw, and just blanking our turn 1. So Inkmoth Nexus, that's a pretty powerful card in this deck because they can just dump a bunch of counters onto it and kill us with Infect before we can even get things going. All right, well, this is a pretty sensational mulligan to 5. Extremely efficient first 2 turns. They got Hardened Scales out on turn 1. Inkmoth Nexus is one of their most efficient win conditions in combination with Steel Overseer. And they even have a Horizon Canopy to potentially draw into more cards. So, pretty frightening stuff. Spreading Seas is pretty nice because I can take them off of this Inkmoth Nexus. Not really afraid of losing to that thing next turn, though. So, I'm going to take this opportunity to play a Silvergill and start getting creatures onto the battlefield. Hopefully we'll draw something decent. Reejerey is strong. However, we don't have a lot of creatures in our hand to unload. The sequencing is kind of weird because you need to reveal a Reejerey if we want to cast the Silvergill Adept. And tapping out on turn 3 against Hardened Scales Affinity is pretty frightening. So Darksteel Citadel, happy to see that, since it just means, it's relatively useless land. Arcbound Worker, again, not super threatening. But Arcbound Ravager is sort of the final combo piece here. Once he starts dumping Steel Overseer's counters, or activating Steel Overseer, these guys are going to be getting 2 counters each turn. It means it's going to be 4, 4, and 8. Activate it again next turn. Inkmoth Nexus will just be lethal. So a really, just truly absurd mulligan to 5. So drew a 6th island, obviously not what I wanted to see. I'm going to play the Spreading Seas here because it's the only thing that gives me a chance to not just die next turn. And we drew a Lord. Unfortunately not going to be able to play a second spell this turn, and obviously can't really attack with the Silvergill. So the opponent just drew a card. It looks like it's a Welding Jar. They get to cycle this Horizon Canopy, and they drew another Inkmoth Nexus. So that is guaranteed win on the next turn. Goes ahead and activates it, puts 2 counters onto it, and can swing with 2 6/6s, so this is just absolutely crushing. We go down to 8. There's really nothing I can do here. As I said, the Inkmoth Nexus just beats us. I could have drawn something like a Trickster, and then maybe play a Silvergill Adept just to gum up the board a little bit, Trickster the Inkmoth. If I drew a Spreading Seas, I guess it could have taken them off the Inkmoth path, but they have 17 power on board just across their dorks, so they could have also sacrificed this Darksteel Citadel to add more power to the Ravager. So really nothing I could do here. I was pretty disappointed in the outcome of Game 1, given the fact that the opponent mulligan to 5, but my hand was pretty weak, and we were on the draw, so all in all, can't really complain. It's obviously a terrible matchup. Let's go ahead and see how Game 2 went. All right, I'm back with Game 2. Let's start by checking out what I did with sideboarding. So we are on the play in this game. Looks like I took out 2 Thassas. I took out 2 Deprives because they're a little bit slow, bouncing our lands, and cut 3 Benthic Biomancers. Ben's not really amazing in this matchup just because we can't really afford to pay 2 mana to loot. It's really not what we want to be doing with our mana in this matchup. We just need to be throwing creatures on the board, or holding up counterspells, or holding up Trickster, playing Harbinger, those kinds of things. So unfortunately, Ben's adaptability, not very useful in this matchup. So if I recall correctly, what I brought in were 3 Ceremonious Rejections, 2 Echoing Truths, and 2 Dismembers. So that would pretty much cover those 7 cards I took out. Again, I took out 3 creatures, 2 Thassas, 2 counterspells, brought in 3 Ceremonious, 2 Echoing Truths, and 2 Deprives. I'm going to be on the play in Game 2. And this is a picture-perfect opening hand. It could do with one more Merfolk, potentially one less land, but I can't complain about this hand. We've got ways to stop their threats, and an Aether Vial to keep getting creatures onto the board. So I'm not going to attack with Mutavault anytime soon, so I'm just going to go ahead and play an island and Aether Vial. Pass to the opponent, they open with Inkmoth Nexus and nothing else, so fairly slow opening out of an Affinity deck. I'll take Aether Vial up to 1, and let's see. Lord is fantastic. It means that if I want to, I could play out this Silvergill right now. However, turn 2 is often very important for the Hardened Scales Affinity deck. I guess turn 2 is really important for pretty much any modern deck. So we're just going to pass with counter spells up and let this Aether Vial continue to tick up. Play the control role for the time being. The opponent did keep on 7 this game. So they opened with Steel Overseer, and I had to think a little bit about which counterspell to use. I did a little bit of math and couldn't really come to a definitive conclusion as to which one to play. Since it is an artifact, I guess I erred on the side of playing the more narrow counterspell with Ceremonious Rejection. Also, it keeps my lands from getting set back by getting bounced by Deprive. So I went with Ceremonious Rejection in this spot, countering the Steel Overseer and, as I was saying, just controlling the early part of the game. Get to take Aether Vial up here, and Reejerey is a pretty nice draw, but with this Aether Vial able to get creatures onto the battlefield, I thought that it would be wise to continue to control the game for a little bit. Opponent leads off with Ancient Stirrings. They might think that my open mana is representing, another Ceremonious Rejection, so I guess that they're going to see what they can find. The top few cards of their deck. Looks like they found a Ravager. But rather than play the Ravager out into open mana, they go with Hardened Scales, which works out well for me because I kept my more general counterspell available. And this is, their namesake spell, and it's definitely worth countering. So I'm going to go ahead and counter this Hardened Scales on the end step. Well, it looks like the opponent has nothing else to do, so on the end step, I can go ahead and Vial in Silvergill Adept, hopefully keep drawing into good stuff. A Harbinger is pretty good. It makes this Aether Vial on 2 particularly good. However, when I am playing in an aggressive matchup and I have an opportunity to get Reejerey onto the table with an Aether Vial, I pretty much always take it just because it's 3 free mana out of the Aether Vial, and it just opens up all the Reejerey value that I get to tap and untap with him on the board. So I did take Aether Vial up to 3 here, drew a 4th land, which now could be useful since I don't have Vial on 2 anymore. If I want to flash in Harbinger, I'll actually have to pay for it. With 4 mana, of course. So I'll play the island, Vial in Reejerey, and then I think I'm just going to play this Lord and untap a land to activate Mutavault. And in response to that, the opponent pretty wisely immediately dismembers the Reejerey. Reejerey can really lead to us pulling out pretty far ahead in the board, on the board. And so by killing him quickly, the opponent prevents me from getting any more value out of him. I still have a Lord on the table, though. I'm just going to activate Mutavault and swing for 6 here. The opponent did pay 4 for that Dismember, so after taking 6, they'll be down to 10. Play their land for the turn, and what have they got for us? Steel Overseer, and follows up with that Ravager that we saw. The opponent draw off of the Ancient Stirrings. All right, so we currently don't know anything about the opponent's hand. We do know they have the pretty scary combo again between the Overseer, Ravager, and Inkmoth Nexus getting in for lethal poison. We do have enough mana to cast Harbinger at instant speed, so that's a nice sort of comforting factor. Gonna leave Aether Vial on 3. I don't have any Master of Waves in the deck. Mutavault, not our best draw here. I would have definitely preferred something like a Trickster or another Reejerey. But it is, or can be, a creature. So I'm gonna go to attacks. I thought a little bit here about potential blocks that the opponent could put up. If they were to sack the Darksteel Citadel to make the Arcbound Ravager a 2/2, they could trade with a Lord. But they can't activate the Inkmoth Nexus yet, and that's really where the opponent wants any counters to be going for their best chance for victory. So I thought it was pretty clear, pretty safe to attack in with both of my guys here. All right, so opponent didn't block. They took 5, so currently 20-5. Play that Mutavault. Got Harbinger online now, and just hope that the opponent, with the 3 cards that they have in their hand, doesn't have anything insane. All right, well, they open with a relatively useless land in Phyrexia's Core. But then they play the card we least want to see in the matchup, Walking Ballista. That card also combos really well with these other guys on the table. It's a good thing that I was able to counter the Hardened Scales, because I would be totally buried at this point with double counters from Steel Overseer and Walking Ballista coming down with 2. So things actually went from looking like a near certain win between having 11 power on board, a Harbinger, and the opponent at 5 life, to looking pretty dire with this Walking Ballista. And another Ravager. So I think what another Ravager does is it makes my interaction a little bit more difficult, because with one Arcbound Ravager out on the board, if they sack it onto something else, I can kill the thing, and then it's a bit of a blowout. But then they still got another Ravager to work with. Ultimately, I don't think it's that big a deal. I think in this case, it might just be like another artifact on the table. Definitely makes things seem more complicated. So let's go ahead and see how the rest of this turn played out. Okay, uses Inkmoth Nexus to animate itself. Tap Steel Overseer to buff everybody. Again, fortunately, Hardened Scales is not on the table. And then the opponent did not attack. Afraid of my attack, I guess. We've played Reejereys, so the opponent could be afraid that if he, activates Walking Ballista at this point, I could vial in another Lord to buff the Lord. But then, of course, they could still sack a Ravager to keep the Ballista at a healthy sort of counter level. But the opponent, I think, just passed through their main and went to the end step. So this seemed like a strange turn to me. With 2 Ravagers, if I was in the opponent's position, I think I probably would have sacked the Darksteel Citadel onto a Ravager, sacked the Ravager onto the Walking Ballista, and then, just shot down the Lord. That would leave me with, 3 2/2s facing down 3/3 Walking Ballista, and another Arcbound Ravager. Of course, the Ballista, after sacking 1 Ravager and a Darksteel Citadel with 5 counters, could take care of the Lord and easily a Silvergill with 1 power, with 1 toughness, and he would still be a 2/2. So they're just facing down 2 Mutavaults with 2 2/2s of their own. They'd have this Inkmoth Nexus ticking up each turn with Steel Overseer. Also can combo for the win the following turn with Arcbound Ravager. But I'm going to go ahead and flash in Harbinger. I need bodies on the table if I'm going to have any chance here, because I do feel very weak to the Walking Ballista. So I target the Inkmoth Nexus, since that is a way for them to just win next turn. Again, if I were in the opponent's seat, I would have played this differently. The game has sort of reached ahead, the tension has reached a maximum point here, and they let me bounce the Inkmoth Nexus. If I were them, I probably would have just sacked it to one of the Arcbound Ravagers, since it's probably not going to have a chance to come back into play and play a role here. If I don't win on my turn, they should be able to win on their turn. But they let me use it. So let's go ahead and continue here. And that was it. Pretty eventful turn. Again, I'm going to keep AEther Vial on 3 and just hope to draw something good. So yeah, going into my draw step, Spreading Seas was definitely on my mind. We do have an Island Walk Lord on the table. If we play Spreading Seas, you know, suddenly we're presenting a pretty formidable threat. Pretty much force the opponent to deal with the Lord. But as I mentioned, with the Darksteel Citadel and double Ravagers, they could easily get this Walking Ballista up to, you know, a pretty healthy power and toughness. So, I mean, Spreading Seas, I chose to go Island Mutavault when casting it because if I went Island and then drew into another Island Walk Lord, I wouldn't be able to cast the Island Walk Lord. By going Island Mutavault, I could then, if I drew into an Island Walk Lord, play another blue source and then play the Island Walk Lord. So yeah, let's go ahead and get the Spreading Seas out and see what it draws us into. I chose to go with Phyrexia's Core here. They've got, you know, redundancy on their forests, and if you target Darksteel Citadel, they can sacrifice it to a Ravager in response. So anyhow, get that Spreading Seas down, establish Island Walk, and yeah, just cross our fingers. Hopefully, draw something good. Spreading Seas into Reejerey is pretty much the best possible combination of two cards off the top of my deck that could have existed, because the AEther Vial is just sitting here waiting for me to play a 3-drop. And Reejerey is pretty much the best in this spot. So I chose to activate Mutavault and go to attacks, and I got in with everybody. The situation is a little bit too complicated to calculate all the possible permutations of blocks and sacks and Walking Ballista activations. So in my view, they're at 5. We've got access to Island Walk. They're going to need to deal with the Lord of Atlantis before blocks even happen. So they don't have Hardened Scales on the table. And if I don't win very soon, or if at least I don't force them into a corner, basically, where they have to start sacrificing things to these Ravagers, it's just going to get a little bit crazy with Seal Overseer and Walking Ballista. So definitely time to Alpha Strike. Again, they have to make a decision before blocks about what to do with the Lord. So they start off by sacrificing the Darksteel Citadel onto an Arcbound Ravager. And then they sack the Ravager, trying to put the counters onto the Walking Ballista, which would make it into a 5/5. In response, I activated AEther Vial to bring in the Reejerey, because if the opponent wants to keep the Walking Ballista and kill the Island Walk Lord, now they'd have to either sack the other Arcbound Ravager right now, which would open them up to a lot of attackers, or just let the Reejerey or let the AEther Vial resolve, which buffs all my creatures and makes it harder for them to get value off of the ballista triggers. Or activations, I should say. So they let the AEther Vial resolve, Reejerey hit the board, and it's still declare attacks, so they still have to deal with the Island Walk Lord. So they ping him 3 times, Ballista's back down to 2, and now their creatures can block. So, you know, they did pretty much the best they could. At this point, they still had to block. Without killing the Reejerey, they would still have to block 2 guys. If they killed the Reejerey before blocks, they would all be 2 power creatures, and they could have blocked 1 and taken 4, but this way, they only have to take 3, so pretty good play from the opponent. At least as far as lining up blocks and effectively using the Walking Ballista triggers. So the Arcbound Ravager is going to eat my Mutavault here, but then he's going to take 2 from the Silvergill. We ultimately traded the Lord of Atlantis for and a Reejerey for the Walking Ballista and one of the Ravagers. So they replay the Inkmoth Nexus, and that thing is still pretty threatening, because they still have an Arcbound Ravager left on the board. The opponent activated Inkmoth Nexus there, thinking about tapping Steel Overseer to put counters on, but that would leave them with only 2 blockers. they could reanimate Inkmoth Nexus. It would be a 2/2 after getting a counter from Steel Overseer. If I attack with all 3 creatures, assume I draw a land here, they would take 2, and they could let the Inkmoth Nexus just trade and eat one of my creatures with Ravager, but it seems more likely that they would block 2 things and then sort of dump all the Ravager triggers onto, or counters onto the Inkmoth Nexus. I don't have any poison though right now, so that might not get the Inkmoth Nexus up to enough counters. So what the opponent is doing here basically is giving themselves outs by leaving all 3 creatures untapped, and if I don't draw something that wins a game this turn, they can win next turn by activating Steel Overseer again. Sorry, on my end step, they'll activate Overseer. Inkmoth Nexus will go up to 1 counter, do it again next turn, 2 counters. The Ravager will be at 5 at that point. That would, if they draw any artifacts, play it, sack it, that'd be 6, 2 is 8. Getting really close to lethal with the Inkmoth Nexus on the next turn. So at this point, I thought a lot about what my outs were, and maybe you guys want to think at this point too what my outs are in this situation. I left AEther Vial on 3. Again, I don't have anything to do with it on 4. Clearly, any Island Walk Lord should win off the top. I don't believe we know what's in their hand at this point. We bounced their Inkmoth Nexus, but then they replayed it. So Island Walk Lord should do it because if they can't answer it, well, I guess Dismember is probably their only removal spell, and they're off of Dismember life total. So Island Walk Lord wins. Reejerey might not win outright because I'd have 3 power creatures. They could activate the Inkmoth Nexus, and they'd be able to stay alive, but their board would probably be substantially reduced. So Reejerey is probably pretty good. Trickster here could tap down, for example, the Ravager, turn it off, sort of force them to use the Ravager right away. But then they still have 2 blockers up. They could block and then activate the Steel Overseer, making it a 3/3, allowing it to eat one of my creatures. So Trickster might not necessarily do the job here. I guess in this spot we're pretty much looking, I guess Spreading Seas is good too to turn off the Inkmoth Nexus. So go to the draw step. So I hit a land in that spot. I'm going to go ahead and play the Oboro, and I have no attacks. So this is looking pretty poor for us. Having whiffed on the land, opponent's going to activate their Inkmoth Nexus as I outlined earlier. All the creatures get +1 counters. Opponent plays a forest. Looks like they're not drawing super well. And there's a Spellskite. So what Spellskite does here is it turns off Dismember, it turns off Trickster, and it might just make this attack lethal. Let's see. If the opponent activates Steel Overseer, this becomes 3, this becomes 5. And to be lethal, this turn, the Nexus needs 9 counters on it. So again, you'd have 5 counters, and then sack, 6, 7, makes it 8 counters. I think it might not be lethal this turn, even with this activation, because again, sack, makes Ravager go up to 7. Oh no, because of course the Inkmoth Nexus got an extra counter as well. So there is lethal here if the opponent sacks everything onto the Inkmoth Nexus. However, I do have 1 card in hand, and we have played a Harbinger earlier in the game when I left, or was it when did I play that Harbinger at instant speed? I guess it must have been earlier in this game. So they could potentially not go all in just for fear of being blown out. If they get another turn, then it becomes that much more likely that they can close it out. So when the opponent's attacking here, I think a lot of players would just F6. because there's really nothing that we can do in this spot. Obviously, I'm just holding a land. But by pausing for a second before attacks, not too long, you don't want to oversell anything. You know, obviously they're going to attack. That's not really the question. They still have 2 blockers up, so unless I draw a Lord, they've got me covered on the crackback. But then again, after attacks, I can't block, but I thought for a second, you know, before just passing through to damage, or rather passing through to blocks, just basically thinking for, you know, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. The opponent thought for quite a while. And then ultimately, they decided not to go all in. And, you know, I feel like I can chalk that one up to conscientious, I don't know if you can call it bluffing, but being engaged with the game, even though we're in a dead lost situation. The opponent, next turn, if they get to untap, they played it safe, basically. They get to activate Steel Overseer again. Then they can very easily win since I already have 3 poison. They'll figure out a path to make that Inkmoth Nexus lethal. Now, of course, I can draw another Spreading Seas to turn the Inkmoth Nexus off. Spellsky can't do much about that. And in this spot, we do have some nice outs because they only have 2 blockers. Trickster is suddenly live. I think we have 4 Tricksters. We haven't seen any yet. Tap down one of their creatures. It doesn't matter if they redirect it with Spellskite, which, funnily enough, they have blue mana to do that with. 2 guys would be getting through for 4 damage. So 4 Tricksters are live. I believe we've only seen 1 Island Walk Lord so far. So 7 more Island Walk Lords makes it 11. Reejereys are good because if our creatures get 3 power, one of them is going to get through, and that will be lethal. And I believe we have 2 more Reejereys in the deck, so that's like 13. And then I think you have the 2 Echoing Truths, 2 Dismembers. So, you know, we've got like close to 20 outs here. Harbinger is not good enough, I don't think, because just sacking the Ravager alone is enough at this point to make the Inkmoth Nexus lethal next turn. Bouncing the Overseer doesn't really help the math, so just Tricksters, Island Walk Lords, Reejereys, and then the Dismembers and Echoing Truths should be enough here. So the deck had been drawing well throughout most of the game, and I was hoping for something good, and we got the Reejereys. So I just activated the Mutavault, put the Reejerey into play, and swung with the team. Nothing the opponent can do in this spot, so they conceded. And it was I was pretty tense. As I mentioned, we were dead lost, but the opponent, for whatever reason, decided not to go all in that turn to try to go for the win, and we were able to turn it around with a good top deck. So still in it. Let's go ahead to Game 3 and see how that one went. Hey guys, I'm back for Game 3. I will be on the draw this game. So sideboarding looks like it stayed the same. I chose not to take a land out just because I didn't really have many other great choices. Typically I take out lands, but I felt that in this matchup, still with a couple Deprives in the deck, on the draw, getting land screwed could be a pretty easy way to lose. This is sketchy, but I'm going to keep it. It's got interaction with Harbinger, card draw with Silvergill, and a battle, a way to get things onto the table with AEther Vial. Opponent kept 7 as well, so shaping up to potentially be a slugfest. Turn 1, Forest into Hardened Scales. That's what we hope to not see. Island is excellent. Going to be able to at least curve out through turn 2. Hardened Scales into Walking Ballista. So they've got a 2/2 creature that is also a removal spell on the board. Another land is exactly what we were hoping to hit. Silvergill is a very poor play here because the opponent can just pick it off right away with Walking Ballista if they choose to do so. So I went with the Lord. I gave it some thought. Facing down this Walking Ballista on turn 2 with a Hardened Scales on the table is pretty rough, but we're going to want to get our Merfolk's toughness as high as possible, as quickly as possible. All right, opponent going with Ancient Stirrings here. Potentially trying to hit a land. Looks like they did. So no Arcbound Ravager, but there's a Hangerback Walker here. They have no sack outlet at this point. They played that Forest, so we can hide it. And my guess is they're not going to want to attack with this Walking Ballista here. We can take our AEther Vial up to 2. Another Island Walk Lord would be great to be able to Vial in right now. But we keep getting lands. Still not bad at this point. 4 lands, potentially making Harbinger live at instant speed. So I chose just to get a Reejerey out here. The opponent is put to the question here. They can either sack their Walking Ballista to get rid of one of my lords, and risk getting blown out if I can Vial in another lord. Again, they don't have any kind of... they don't have a Ravager here to get more counters onto the Ballista to make sure that it survives. But the opponent let this resolve, and I breathed a sigh of relief because, at least for the time being, our creatures, can't be killed by this Walking Ballista. If they slam a 4th land, though, they could activate Walking Ballista and put 2 more counters onto him, which is a pretty scary possibility. I ultimately chose not to attack there. It's possible I could have gotten in with a cheeky attack for 3 with the Lord. If he double blocked, I would have chosen to kill the Ballista. And then in response, it's going to get 2 damage to this guy. Double blocking is not good for them, so I could have attacked there. Not quite sure why I didn't. I think I was just afraid, with the Walking Ballista on the board, of losing any of my current board presence. But again, I probably wouldn't have lost any of my... Well, if I lost one of my creatures, they would have lost the Ballista. So the attack would have been reasonable. What do you guys think about that particular moment, whether I should have attacked with the Lord or not? Okay, so they're going with another Hangerback Walker here. Just X equals 1, but it still enters with 2 because of Hardened Scales. And then here's the Arcbound Ravager. So this is the Nightmare. They've even got a Darksteel Citadel to add more fuel to the fire. The Citadel with Ravager just makes another 2 counters that they can distribute onto any of this stuff. If he sacrifices a Hangerback Walker, it gets 2 counters on the Ravager, and then each subsequent Thopter that's made makes another 2 counters. So this is effectively 6 counters and 6 counters, putting this guy up to 14 counters, which can make the Ballista to a 16, something like that. So let's see. Sack plus 2 is 4. Sack is 6, 8, and then another 6, 14. Sack this actually gets a +1, extra +1 when he sacks, right? So it's not going to be 60, probably 17. I don't think I'm counting this either. It's like 19. So this might be another situation where the opponent, with me tapped out, could have just gone all in on Walking Ballista and just domed me for 20. If we do the math really, one more time, just really quickly, sack is +2, and then sack both Thopters is +6 more. 6, 6, 12. Sorry to do this so many times, but I didn't really think that he could dome me during the game here. So that goes to 14. Sack this, goes up to 16. Sack everything to put it onto the Ballista would take him to 18, plus 1 because of Hardened Scales would be 19. So it'd be 19. Okay, so he would lose his board to be able to get me down to 1 life, I think, and lose the Walking Ballista. So it might not be quite time for him to do that yet, but the threat is real. We're going to activate Vial here just to bring in Silvergill and hope that we draw something good. Another land is not very good. As I mentioned, if I have the opportunity to Vial in a Reejerey, I typically take it. Dismember was a pretty awesome draw there, potentially punishing the opponent for not kind of going all in when they have the opportunity to do so. Because now, if they did the line that I was saying, when they went to sack the Arcbound Ravager, I could just Dismember the Walking Ballista, and they would have lost their whole board for nothing. So Dismember is great insurance in this spot. I think the line here is Vial in the Reejerey, and then hardcast Harbinger now to try to get the Ballista off the table. Of course, they could just replay it next turn, get potentially even more counters, and as I mentioned, they could just sack and dome me, but I do have the Dismember in hand. So if they chose to take that line, I could dismember the Walking Ballista in response to the Ravager. Another approach would be just to leave up all 4 mana and play Harbinger, but then that takes me off of Dismember, since Harbinger would use all 4 of our mana. So, Vialing in Reejerey, hard casting Harbinger lets me tap the Ballista to combo with Harbinger, and then also untap one of my lands to leave up Mutavault and Dismember. The opponent decides before it gets bounced, they're going to let him get tapped. They ping me for 1, and then bounce the Ballista. That 1 is relevant because, as I was mentioning, they got me... With the current board state, they could have gotten me for 19. So now I am at 19. All right, so actually chose to activate Mutavault here, and even with kind of the shenanigans that could go on with all of the sacrificing with Thopters and whatnot, I thought it was time to get a good attack in. We need to do something this turn, and then potentially close things out the following turn. So the opponent starts by sacking a Hangerback Walker. That's going to make the Ravager into a 4/4. And then they sack one of the Thopters to make it into a 6/6. So opponent lines up blocks. Looks like they're set to take 9 here and eat the Lord of Atlantis. Of course, I could use Dismember on the Arcbound Ravager to take him down to a 1/1. But he could then, of course, just sack some more stuff and get a ton more counters onto him to get him back up to a good size. As it went, the opponent chose just to leave him as a 6/6, and the Dismember I was going to leave, remember, for the Ballista if it gets replayed. Opponent does sack one more Thopter just to put him up to an 8/8. And yeah, they took 9, went down to 11. I lost my Island Walk Lord, but dealt 9 damage. We've still got 2 Reejereys on the table. Looks like they drew an Inkmoth Nexus for the turn with this Arcbound Ravager and another Hardened Scales. That's definitely lethal by itself. But again, in response to an Arcbound Ravager sack, we can always cast Dismember. So here's a Walking Ballista getting cast with X equals 2. They tapped out, so they're not going to use Inkmoth Nexus right now. Or rather, they're not going to activate it right now. They have no more mana available. Opponent got in with Hangerback and Arcbound Ravager. I'm not really sure what the drawback of blocking the Hangerback would have been. In theory, I guess the opponent could sack the Ravager and make the Hangerback really big, and then I'd lose my Lord. But then they can't sack to put the counters on the Ballista. In the end, I thought that 10 damage was not very different from 8 damage if I block the Hangerback. If we do a little bit of math to see if the Ravager would be lethal if left unblocked, he could... Now, each thing that he sacks actually gets +3/+3. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 15. Again, if I leave the Arcbound Ravager unblocked, I think I should just be dead here. Because Hardened Scales is doubling up now. So sack the Citadel, Ravager becomes 11/11. Sack the Hangerback Walker, it becomes 14/14. Sack a Thopter, it becomes 17. Sack the other Thopter, it becomes 20. I mean, at that point, they can, if they didn't have 20, they could just dome me with a few pings from Walking Ballista. So it's totally possible, actually likely, that not blocking the Ravager was a mistake here. But this opponent has played conservatively at multiple instances throughout this match, and they chose not to go all in there. I guess they figured that they could just do the damage and then dome me with Ballista afterwards. Which is actually what they went for. They sacked the Arcbound Ravager now on second main, and this gave me the opening to dismember this Walking Ballista. Which is pretty wild, because I can cast Dismember in this spot. It's what we've been saving it for. We go down to 5 after paying 4 for Dismember, and the opponent has exactly 4 counters on Ballista. They could take me down to 1 life. They ping me once, but then realize that I'm not going to die, so they just go after one of the Reejereys. But you guys are good at Merfolk math, and you can see right away that I've got 3, 3, 3, and 2, which is 11. So I don't need anything off the top of the deck. The deck doesn't give me anything. I activate. I've got 3, 2, and then 6 more for exact lethal. So that was a really insane match. It's not a matchup that I really enjoy, just because we tend to just get run over. But this was really nice interactive Magic. The opponent was put in positions where they had to make decisions about how to win the game, and in the couple of instances where it really mattered, they chose the wrong path. As we saw there, they went with the Ballista win, and I was able to Dismember. If they had gone with just sacking everything to the Arcbound Ravager after I didn't declare blocks, I would have been just totally lost. In the previous game, they could have gone all in on the Inkmoth Nexus if they took their shot. They didn't, and I ultimately drew another Lord and got around their blockers for lethal. So it's the kind of match that you come across, in my experience, I don't know, 1 every 100 matches or so, and I really thought it was important to share it with you guys. I'm sure I didn't play it super optimally. I just did the best that I could. And that's it. Thanks for watching, guys. Again, hopefully at some point in the near future, I can start uploading again more regularly. If you'd like to support the channel in the meantime, please check out the link to my Patreon page, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks very much. Bye.